Welcome. If you like stories about magic, mayhem, and murder, you're my people and you're in the right place. Because today we're doing something new. This is my first ever monthly reading wrap-up and catch-up chat. And I'm a little nervous because this is something I've wanted to try for a long time, but I wasn't sure if it would interest anybody. But as an astrologer, I'm always encouraging other people to get out of their comfort zones, and I realized it's time I faced my fears and took my own advice. I really believe that when we feel called to do something with our whole hearts, there's a reason, even if it doesn't make logical sense yet. So here goes. I'm a mixed genre reader, but my favorite place to play is in the shadows. So I read a lot of horror, mystery, true crime, and books starring witches and vampires. And I'm also a fan of horror movies, so some of my thoughts on those will also creep in from time to time. Before I tell you about the books I read in March 2026, I just saw Forbidden Fruits this weekend. And babe, I think you should see the movie. Forbidden Fruits tells the story of the Fruits, three gorgeous and effortlessly cool young women named Apple, Cherry, and Fig. They're best friends, they're co-workers, and they're queens of them all. They work at a store called Free Eden, and after hours they hold a secret coven in the basement of the store where they practice their own flavor of witchcraft. The Fruits' biggest problems are their demanding manager Sharon and the looming threat of the patriarchy. But then a new young woman named Pumpkin enters the mix. Sweet and naive, Pumpkin seems like the perfect fruit to complete their juicy salad. But as she gets deeper into the group, the feminist paradise they've created starts to look more like hell. I think I saw a story about this movie around when it recently premiered at South by Southwest, and it was described as Mean Girls meets The Craft. That premise, along with the knowledge that it starred 4 women, was all I needed to know. I didn't read the rest of the article, I didn't watch the trailer, I didn't read anything else about it. I was completely sold, and I bought a ticket and I saw it opening weekend. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I would describe Forbidden Fruits as a hyper-feminine horror comedy. It is campy, it is messy, it is very twisted. It's not a perfect movie, I'm gonna be real. Had a few flaws, but I'm truly happy to overlook those flaws for everything else it brought to the table. Forbidden Fruits was written and directed by women. A ton of the people on the crew were women, all of the main characters are women, and we barely hear from male characters in the movie at all. Each of the fruits is given a rich and complicated backstory to help you understand why being a fruit matters so much, even as the group starts to get increasingly toxic. The actresses in this movie did a phenomenal job. Without their performances, the movie wouldn't have worked. They committed hard. Lily Reinhart as Apple and Victoria Pedretti as Cherry especially blew me away. The look of the film, it's a feast of colors and sparkles. The fashion, the accessories, the hair, and the makeup were all on point, and it really made me want to up my game. I also love the soundtrack, which is filled with female artists too. From the first time we see Apple, Cherry, and Fig owning them all together in their coordinated charm bracelets, I desperately wanted to be a fruit, which is so uncool to admit. You cannot let them smell that on you because a fruit would never. It's all about doing the most while looking like you're not doing anything at all. The movie explores female friendship, how it lifts us up and saves us, and then also how it breaks us down and destroys us. It's also about the pressures we're under as women to be perfect all the time. And it's about consumerism and the cult of retail. Forbidden Fruits is horror, but the horror comes from how scary female friendships are. Think about how scary it is to confide in another woman and let her see your secrets and vulnerabilities. Like, she can destroy you with those secrets. Okay, it's also horror because it explores the extreme sides of the fears that we can't measure up or fit in or create the life we feel that we're meant to have. So a lot of the horror in this movie is invisible, subversive horror. But the movie does get gory in the second half. I didn't find the gore upsetting, but just be aware of it if you are sensitive to that kind of thing. Let me just get on my soapbox for a second and say that I hope you'll consider supporting this independent, female-driven film, because movies like this are really rare and precious. I've seen some rave reviews, and I've seen some reviews where people felt like it didn't really work. And I get where both sides are coming from, I do. And I saw a lot of people online saying they wanted more witchcraft in the film, and same, babe. But I say that about every movie I see. I do think the witchcraft that's there is funny and provocative. even if the movie is not your cup of tea, I still think it deserves recognition. I can't think of very many movies off the top of my head that were created by women and celebrate how messy and complicated it is to be a woman. There are practically no movies like this one where I can count the number of times when a man speaks on one or two hands, but I can think of lots of movies where that's true about women. The fact that this even exists is magic, and I think that alone makes it worth supporting. But I also genuinely loved it, and I will definitely buy it when it's available and put it in my regular October rotation of films. I think it's the kind of movie where you'll notice a lot of things the more you rewatch it. Have you seen Forbidden Fruits yet? What did you think of it? Do you want to be a fruit? Or are you sane and well-adjusted? Let me know in the comments. I promised you bookish content, so let's get into everything I read in March 2026. I finished 8 books in March, and I DNF'd, meaning did not finish, could not finish, hated 1 book. My average star rating was 3.1, which I think is a little low for me, but I did have 2 books this month that I really enjoyed, and I can't wait to tell you about those. 6 of the books I read are currently in stores, and 2 of them were advanced reader copies for books coming out later this year. I came into March after a very slumpy February. So I started with this resolution that I was only going to read books that looked like they would be fun to get my reading mojo back. The first book I picked up was Evil Genius by Claire Oshetsky. Evil Genius came out in February 2026. I don't remember how I heard about this one, but I was definitely excited about it because I had a hold on it at the library well before it came out, and I got to check it out soon after the release. The first sentence of the publisher's description called it an exuberant, brutally hilarious novel about a young woman's insatiable quest to carve her own path, even if she needs to step over a few bodies along the way. I mean, that could not sound more up my alley. I read that and I'm ready for unhinged behavior that completely flies in the face of social conventions. I want men dropping like flies and a heroine too clever to get caught. I love the cover of the book. It's feminine and retro, but it leaves you guessing about the rest of the picture. I like to think the woman attached to these hands is sucking the life force out of this very well put together man. Almost all the author blurbs about this novel use words like comedy, hilarious, and dark humor. So I settled in to have a fabulous time. Think you know what's coming. Listen, humor is subjective, and if you read this novel and thought it was funny, I truly love that for you. But I'm not convinced that anyone who wrote those author blurbs read this book, because I didn't so much as crack a smile. This book is bleak, bleak, bleak. It's a first-person narrative, so we're in the main character's head the whole time. Her name is Celia Dent, and she's only 19 years old. Celia is an orphan. She's in an unhappy marriage with a man who is significantly older than her, and he abuses her verbally, physically, and even sexually. Her mother-in-law is a piece of work. Celia has a customer service job at the phone company where she is sexually harassed and yelled at all day long. Because she's an uneducated orphaned female living in 1974, we really don't see any options for her improving her situation. Like, where is she going to go? Then she learns that another woman who works at the phone company has been shot to death by her husband because of an illicit affair. Celia becomes obsessed with the case and tries to imagine the crime scene from every angle. I get this because when I worked in customer service, I also spent a lot of time thinking about killing people. And one of the people Celia thinks about killing is her husband. And I get that too, because he's awful to her. He clearly married her because she's young and alone, and he can control and bully her as much as he wants. So as all of this daily drudgery unfolds, I'm going along with it because I'm waiting for Celia to carve her own path and step over a few bodies along the way. I'm thinking she's going to decide that she has nothing to lose and indulge in her wildest homicidal fantasies. And instead, we get more domestic abuse. There's an upsetting situation with a customer of the phone company whose life is ruined when Celia turns off her service due to a large unpaid bill. Won't tell you more about that because I don't want to spoil it, even though I really don't see any of you reading this from the way I'm describing it. This is a book you should check trigger warnings on if you are thinking about reading it and you're sensitive to darker themes, because there's a lot of dark stuff in here. It would be difficult to write a story that went into all the tough stuff that this one did and make it funny. Difficult. Not impossible. This just wasn't that book. I found it so unrelentingly depressing. Now, if the tagline was rewritten from an exuberant, brutally hilarious novel about a young woman's insatiable quest to carve her own path, even if she needs to step over a few dead bodies along the way, to A bleak and depressing novel about a young woman's unending oppression and a few dead bodies along the way. Probably would have skipped this one, but at least I would have been prepared for the mood. And I guess the title was supposed to be ironic? Nobody in this book was giving Evil Genius. After reflection, this one just wasn't for me. I gave Evil Genius 2 stars and happily returned it to the library. Okay, so my first book was a depressing flop. I still really wanted to read something I could have fun with. And what could be more fun than a gothic tale of a woman confined alone in an attic, deprived of her freedom until she learns to be the ideal Victorian wife? That screams fun until its throat is so ravaged it can't scream anymore. Right? Fun? So for my second read of the month, I picked up the novel Carrion Crow by Heather Parry. Carrion Crow is already out in the UK, but it's getting its US release on June 30th, 2026. I was very privileged to get an advanced reader copy of this book, which I pursued because this was one of Sinead Hanna's top 10 books of 2025. If you don't know Sinead Hanna, she's a popular horror booktuber, which means she makes spooky book content for YouTube. I love Sinead's content. I think she's incredibly intelligent, articulate, and very entertaining. And I've benefited from her recommendations in the past. For example, she recommended the Norwegian film The Ugly Stepsister in a video last fall, and that turned out to be one of my favorite movies of the year. Sinead did say in her top 10 video that Carrion Crow wouldn't be for everyone. But I thought, surely it will be for me. Well, okay, I didn't hate it. First of all, the author absolutely triumphed in creating the book that she wanted to create. Carrion Crow is about Marguerite, who has been imprisoned in the small and claustrophobic attic of her family's home in London by her mother, Cecile. Cecile has had a traumatic life full of misfortune, and she fears that Marguerite will suffer a similarly cruel fate if she's unprepared for the hardships of becoming a wife and mother. Left alone with an unwieldy sewing machine, Mrs. Beeton's book of household management, and a nesting carrion crow, Marguerite tries to reshape herself into a version of womanhood her mother and future husband would approve of, with monstrous results. Now, I say the author triumphed in creating the book she wanted to create because I do think this is an original take on the mad woman confined in the attic trope we've seen in so many Gothic novels. The lack of female agency is set up in a way that feels completely period appropriate and true to life. The writing is evocative, it's claustrophobic, and extremely disturbing. There were a couple scenes in particular took my breath away. I don't want to spoil anything, but Marguerite's sewing takes a distressing turn. The ongoing theme throughout the novel about how women feel compelled to shrink and fit into boxes was very poignant. The book was tense, it provoked interesting questions about what is natural or unnatural, what is monstrous. So in some ways, I think this novel was very well done. However, I was pretty miserable reading it. Okay, it was so hard for me to get through. It's a shortish novel. It's only 256 pages, and I read it in 2 sittings, but several days apart because after I read the first 30%, first time I read it, I really had to psych myself up to keep going and power through. The book is upsetting in a lot of ways. And before you come at me, I completely understand that that is the point. Believe me, I get that. The way that society treats women and mothers at all class levels has been and continues to be appalling. The way society treats animals is also appalling. But I think this book was grueling beyond the point it needed to be. When the text wasn't giving us long sections of background information on the family history, it was section after section of stomach-churning, completely grotesque descriptions of foods and bodily excretions. I'm not saying those descriptions were gratuitous or only there to shock the reader, but they did get repetitive and relentless. In the author's note, she describes the book as visceral, and I think that is the perfect description for this book. This is a book about the horrors of material reality. And I think that's our mismatch because I am a reader who gravitates toward psychological and mental horror. Obviously, a mother who imprisons her own adult daughter in the attic, or any daughter of any age, and a daughter who allows her to do so, they'd make great subjects in an abnormal psychology book. But a lot of the psychology that was driving their actions was left ambiguous or unexplained. But the rotting food and the vomit was gone into in spectacularly vivid detail. But even though this wasn't a fun read for me, I don't think I'll be forgetting it for a while. There are things about it that kept coming up thematically that I'm still trying to work out what the author was doing. I would always much rather read something that makes me think than something cookie cutter and uninspired. Because this is a provocative story with a lot of ambiguity, it probably would be a good book club read. Talking it through with other people could give you deeper takeaways. But unfortunately, I read it alone, and while I think it did most of what it set out to do, it did not win me over. If I had a better time reading it, I'd say a reread might help me have more clarity about it. But I really don't want to reread it. If you love gross, visceral, feminist horror, give it a try. But I wasn't fully satisfied, so I gave Carrion Crow 3 stars. Okay, I started the month with 2 not-so-fun reads, but I was positive that my third pick would be The Charm. Surely I'd learned from my mistakes and recalibrated, right? Right? Huh? Okay. The next book I read, oh my God, you guys, this book. Okay. The next book I read was Psychopomp and Circumstance by Eden Royce. I chose this book because I thought the title is so cute and clever. Psychopomp and Circumstance is obviously a play on Pomp and Circumstance. And I was obsessed with the cover art. How stunning is this cover? I desperately want to know this young woman who looks like she's peeking beyond the veil and communicating with spirits. Set during the Reconstruction period of American history, but in a gaslamp fantasy version of that era, Psychopomp and Circumstance follows Fee St. Margaret. Fee is a sheltered 20-year-old woman whose parents have hopes of marrying her off. We learn in the first few pages that Fee is not like other girls. She tries to behave for the sake of her parents, who are respected members of the free Black business community of New Charleston. But she wants different things. When a messenger arrives to tell the family that Fee's estranged aunt has passed away, Fee leaps at the chance to take on the role of Pomp and plan her funeral send-off. We journey with Fee to the home her late aunt was exiled to and see her struggle to do right by someone she barely knew and maybe mend the rift that tore her family apart. I had very high hopes for this book. I imagined that through the process of taking on this huge responsibility, Fee was going to discover that she had magical or mystical abilities as a psychopomp, and we would see her transform from a spoiled girl into a powerful healer. If you don't know what a psychopomp is, the traditional definition is a guide or conductor of souls who ushers spirits of the deceased into the afterlife. Psychopomps can be gods, spirits, or even human beings with shamanic or necromantic abilities. The title of this book has the word psychopomp in it, but the actual text never uses the word psychopomp, not once. In the text, Fee is supposed to pomp her late aunt, by which the author tells us she means plan her funeral. Any ushering of souls is an incredibly minor part of this story. But I guess the title Funeral Planning and Circumstance didn't have the same ring to it. So that was my first disappointment. My second issue with this book was that it set up these stakes very early on in the story that if Fee doesn't do a good job pomping or planning the perfect send-off for her aunt, she will go to jail. This was brought up again and again in the book. The funeral isn't exactly right. The consequences are imprisonment. Excuse me? Why? You can't just set up stakes like that and then not explain where they're coming from. Being put in prison is not a normal consequence for poor event planning. If you told me that a bad funeral would dishonor the family or show that Fee wasn't ready to take on adult responsibilities, I would be on board. But jail? What the? It took me so far out of the story to have this character repeatedly worrying about something. I mean, over and over, she's worrying that she's going to end up in jail. And I couldn't make sense of it. What even is the government in this world? I have no idea. I also found the main character extremely irritating. I tried to give her grace and say she's only 20 years old. She's grieving a woman she has unfinished business with. But I found Fee to be self-absorbed, immature, and unlikable. I mean, yes, that's 20-year-olds, right? But it was hard to read. The funeral planning is a chance in a lifetime for her to prove she can do more than be someone's wife. And then she's rattled by the fact that she has to get up at 8 a.m. to meet funeral directors one day. Like, this is a big sacrifice for her. But my biggest problem with this book was all of the things it tried to be in only 166 pages. Here are some of the things it tried to be. A Southern Gothic, a gaslamp fantasy, a haunted house ghost story, a domestic thriller, a coming-of-age story of feminist empowerment, and a book about grief. In trying to do all of those things in a custom-built world, in a fictional version of a historic period, I don't think it did any of them well. There were glimmers of something special once in a while in the book, like messengers with bird heads, or one very sinister funeral director trying to win Fee's business, but none of those elements reappeared or paid off later in the story. I am very sorry to say, I hated this book. I hated it. I think it's going to be one of my biggest disappointments of the year, just because I thought it had so much potential to be something special, and it didn't deliver on any level for me. But I do have to acknowledge I'm in the minority of readers. Unbelievably to me, this book has an average of 4.4 stars on Amazon with 76 reviews. Nobody on Amazon rated it lower than 3 stars. Nobody. On Storygraph, it has an average of 3.78 stars with over 500 reviews. I did see some lower ratings on that platform, and they kind of had the same review I did. But the overall consensus seems to be that this is a worthwhile read. Some reviewers said they found it moving and beautifully written. This is one of those times where I feel like I read a different draft of the story. If you haven't read this one, I certainly wouldn't recommend it. But if you have, let me know how you felt about it. Let me know if you felt differently. It really pained me to do it, but I gave Psychopomp and Circumstance 1.5 stars. At the same time that I was reading Evil Genius, Carrion Crow, and Psychopomp and Circumstance, I was also reading First Witches Club by Maisey Yates. I think this was a Kindle First Reads book in February, so I picked it up for free. I like to read around bedtime, but because my favorite books are full of mayhem and murder, I find it's usually a good idea for me to have something lighter going for when I'm trying to fall asleep. Over the years, I've learned that murder, vampires, and hexing are so stimulating that I will stay up too late reading just one more chapter. And if I read the really good stuff right before I close my eyes, I do sometimes get nightmares, which can be fun, but not particularly restful. So most of the time, I cut myself off from reading darker books by 9 p.m. or so and switch to something lighter to help me fall asleep. Let me know in the comments if you do something like this or if you have your own system, because I'm really curious. When I saw First Witches Club, I was pretty sure it was going to be a mashup between the 90s movie First Wives Club and Witches, maybe a practical magic flavor. I wouldn't say First Wives Club is one of my favorite movies, but I do think it's fun and nostalgic. I enjoy the zany revenge plot and the message that women are so much stronger when they come together. And I cannot overstate this. I would watch Bette Midler, Goldie Hawn, and Diane Keaton doing absolutely anything. Grocery shopping, walking the dog, cleaning their bathtub, because they are, or were, rest in peace, Diane, so captivating and talented that they could make the most mundane things seem interesting to me. So my first impression was correct. The book is definitely taking the story structure of First Wives Club and it's introducing witchcraft. And I do think there's a version of this that would work really well for me. This wasn't it, guys. I made it to 48% of this book, and I said to myself, please don't make me keep reading this. I can't. These women are so annoying. Yes, annoying like that, like I'm being right now. They're annoying. The first half of this book has all the sad sack. Our men are huge disappointments. They've wronged us. It's all those elements of the beginning of First Wives Club without the off-the-wall plots that hilariously unfold in the movie or the charisma of the characters. And I know I'm asking a lot of written characters to come as alive as the actresses in First Wives Club. It wasn't even close. Just like in First Wives Club, First Witches Club follows 3 main scorned women who have given years of their life to men who don't deserve them. But these women discover they have access to some magic. And in the first half of the book, the main spell they choose to cast is to humiliate one of the exes. And he basically spills some stuff on his shirt and trips at his kid's baseball game. That'll teach him. I wouldn't be caught dead at a kid's baseball game. The spilling and the tripping, though, that sounds like a standard Tuesday to me. I'm not sure that would even cause me to look up from my phone. I'm thinking, is this it? I would wish a worse hex than that on someone who took the last Oreo. I'm not kidding. And we know this guy really sucks, too. The hex should have made all of his appendages fall off, and then a rabid dog runs out and scarfs them up and chases him onto a 4-lane highway. Get him! Right. So this is supposed to be my lighter read, and it had me fantasizing about homicidal twists, which doesn't keep it in the light territory that I was hoping for. Magic was weak. And then at the same time, it really bothered me. These women's marriages are falling apart, and not one of them sees a divorce attorney. One leaves her home because her husband tells her to. You know how people yell at the screen in horror movies when the characters are going into the obviously haunted house where the killer is hiding? I'm yelling at this book because the character is leaving a home that's half hers without talking to a lawyer. But the final nail in the coffin for me was that the book was also clearly setting up love interests for each of these women. We had the male friend who's always been there, and we had meet cutes, and I wanted to scream at everybody. The answer to disappointing men is not new men. If one of the women soothes her sorrows with rebound fling, I could get on board, but they're barely out of their marriages and they're all finding new men who have the one stamped on their foreheads. This is not the way, and it is boring. Okay, to be fair, I don't know where the book goes in the second half. Maybe it gets much better. Maybe the meet cutes become sacrificial cutes. It does have a lot of 4 and 5 star reviews on Amazon. It's just not my flavor of witchy, and it was bumming me out hard. Did you read First Witches Club? Should I finish it, or was it heading to the rom-com endings I suspected? Never mind. I can't finish it. You can tell me what happens in the comments if you must, but no, I'm done with that one. Okay, at this point, between February and the beginning of March, I have had a streak of disappointing reads, and I'm feeling really beaten down. Also, a lot of these books are getting mostly good reviews online, and the thing they all have in common is me. So maybe there just are no more good books in the world for me. It's all over, and I should give up on my quest and take up a new sedentary hobby/obsession, like sports betting. Please let me know in the comments if you ever lose your joy for reading and how you cope with it. Anyway, I was this close to giving up. Enter a very unlikely heroine named Lucy McQuinn. Lucy is a young woman who's forced to possess the body of a frilly antique doll after she's unfairly and brutally murdered by an asshole. Possessing the doll is really her only option, so she can stay on this plane and get revenge on her killer. She really needs to punish him because, again, he's a real asshole and he's getting away with murder. Lucy's the main character in a book called She's a Doll by Barbara Truelove. And I know it's only March, but I may have just found my favorite read of 2026. I can't believe it either. I love this book so much, I almost don't want to tell you about it because I want to keep it like a secret treasure that no one else can touch. But that is crazy and gatekeepy and unfair to the author and all the other people that brought this lovely book into the world. Really, what I need to do is shout it from the rooftops because this is my first 5-star novel of 2026! Finally! And there wasn't any let me sit with this and reflect on whether it's 5-star worthy. Wasn't a doubt in my mind. She's a Doll is a 5-star read. The book begins with a 2-page content warning that not only gives you a heads up about the heavier subject matters that are ahead, but it also cautions you not to trust Lucy. And right from those first 2 pages, I was hooked. Now, the bad news is that this book isn't actually coming out until October 6th. I know, I'm sorry, why am I doing this to you? It's just cruel. Depending on when you watch this video, October is about 6 months away, which is basically eternity. And after I just told you about several books I wouldn't recommend, now I actually have one to plus recommend, but you probably have to wait to read it. How dare I get your hopes up? Am I the villain in this video? I was so lucky to snag an advanced review copy of this. And if you can get it that way, maybe through NetGalley, go for it. But if not, when this book is released, it will make a great spooky season fall read. So at least that's one to look forward to. And I will remind you about it closer to the release date because I think this book is going to be my entire personality for the rest of the year. I'm definitely buying this when it comes out, and I have my fingers crossed that somebody is going to do one of those special fancy editions with the spreads and the foiling and the whole thing, because this is one I'd actually love to get a trophy copy of. Haunted and possessed dolls happen to be a personal favorite horror trope of mine. I have a small but well-loved doll collection, and when I tell you that I am waiting for any of them to show the slightest symptoms of possession. Anyways, when I saw that this was coming out, I thought it was going to be a feminist Chucky remix. Figured it would be fun and a violent gore fest with a murderous doll. I thought I'd have a good time with it, but it probably wouldn't be anything special. Now, if you are looking for a psycho killer doll book, this actually may not be your cup of tea. There's no gore, and the scares are few and far between. But it is very dark, twisty, and spooky coded for sure. The book is about Lucy and her thirst for vengeance at any cost, but it's also about a beautiful and complex platonic female friendship. Because Lucy is a doll, she can't easily move or communicate with other people, and that makes her desire to destroy her murderer extremely difficult to accomplish. But there is one person she finds she can communicate with, a weird girl she sorta knew when she was alive named Nicola. Now, understandably, Nicola has some reservations about teaming up with a murderous haunted doll, mainly along the lines of questioning her sanity. But the relationship between Nicola and Lucy becomes the heart of the story, and it is so well done. The lengths that Lucy and Nicola go to overcome their feelings of powerlessness and resolve unfinished business become increasingly madcap, captivating, and yes, unhinged. Lucy is a delightful nightmare who I wanted to hurl in the garbage and hold close at the same time. I tried to put myself in her little doll shoes and think about what I would do in her situation. And I had to admit, I'd probably make a lot of the same dubious choices she did. Do check your trigger warnings if you have any, because the book explores big, tough with a capital T subjects like violence against women, but it is written in a way that feels respectful and grounded in reality. Haunted dolls are real. What? Shut up. But it's also sharply funny, and it's a breath of fresh air in a haunted house. And most importantly of all, I deeply cared about what happened to the characters, and that is so rare. We did it! 5-star read! Let me know in the comments what your first 5-star read of 2026 was and why you loved it. And if you've read She's a Doll, tell me what you thought of that one too. When you maybe finish your favorite book of the year on March 13th and you realize there are still 292 days to go, there's definitely hope, because you remember there are some killer books just waiting to be discovered out there. But maybe this is just me. There's also a little sadness. It comes from that withdrawal from such a good world of characters, and there's concern that nothing else will be as satisfying. I'm sad when I can't find a good book to read, and I'm sad when I read a great book. Look, I don't love this about myself either. Is this my toxic trait? Do I have any non-toxic traits? Do you feel sad when you finish a book you love, or is that just a me problem? Anyway, March wasn't even halfway over yet, and girls just want to have more fun. When I saw the cover of An Amateur Witch's Guide to Murder by Kay Valentine, I thought, oh, this is definitely going to be fun. Look at the cover. It has purple, black, oozing goth style, and there's tarot cards. It's like the artist pulled my heart out of my body and juiced it onto the front of a book. So good. An Amateur Witch's Guide to Murder follows Mateo Barrero, the son of a dark and powerful bruja who has inconveniently trapped a demon inside of him and then disappeared. With the help of his astral projecting best friend Ophelia, Mateo hustles a job with an extremely neurotic but wildly wealthy nepo baby named Topher. Topher thinks he's carrying a curse that results in random strangers he comes into contact with dropping dead. If that sounds insane and chaotic, that's because it is, but it's also pretty fun because there were so many wild curveball elements and suspicious characters. The story really kept me guessing. It has curses, missing, possibly murdered people, stalkers, a demon who seems to be growing more powerful by the day. It really went from bad to worse for these characters, and I was here for it. I don't think I read the description of this book before I started it. I'm pretty sure I bought this one on a deal because of the cover vibes alone, and I'm glad I did, because I checked after I'd already read it, and the publisher's description calls it, quote, a hilarious and charming queer romantic fantasy readers won't want to miss. Is it hilarious? I didn't think so. It does have amusing moments. Charming? Sure. Demons who fantasize about devouring people and harnessing dark energy can always be charming. Queer romantic? I mean, there's a small subplot that teases a queer romance. But if you're looking for spice or a standard issue rom-com, I'd probably keep looking. And fantasy, I guess, but it's mostly set in Seattle and San Francisco. So even though there's definitely magic and characters who aren't quite human, it doesn't have that world building that I usually associate with fantasy. I think urban fantasy is a subgenre. I could slap this into urban fantasy. So I don't love how they're marketing this one. And I'm not sure about the title either. An Amateur Witch's Guide to Murder. Mateo's an amateur witch in the sense that he's magical and he's never had a professional witch job before Topher shows up looking for a curse breaker. But the guide to murder part confuses me. There's some murder in the book, don't get me wrong, But if you think you're going to put this book down and use what you learned from it to murder someone, I don't think it will end well for you. Don't do that. Doesn't matter. I'm just telling you not to be swayed by how they're marketing it, because I don't think it's an accurate description of what this book is. Like I said, if you want a cute and cozy rom-com or traditional fantasy, I don't think you'll be that into this. It is not giving warm and fuzzy. But if you like dark and chaotic stories with morally ambiguous characters, intrigue, and powerful grimoires, then I'd recommend you give it a try. Now, this wasn't a 5-star read for me. I liked the very beginning a lot, but then after the first few chapters, it took until about the halfway point for me to really get into the story and feel that I can't put this down feeling. In my opinion, the second half of the book is where it really starts to get good. I also felt like I wanted more when I put the book down, which is a positive, but it just wasn't completely satisfying for some reason. I still had some questions I wanted resolved. This is the author Kay Valentine's first novel, and for a first novel, I think it's pretty fantastic. I'm hoping for a sequel, to be honest, because I just didn't feel like this one fully wrapped up. Mateo, Ophelia, and Topher are well-developed, complex characters, and I would love to follow their adventures further. I gave An Amateur Witch's Guide to Murder 4 stars, and I gave the author a follow on Amazon. I live in Los Angeles, and this March, we've had the hottest days of any March on record. We had several days in a row in the mid-90s and a couple of weeks in the high 80s. When it gets this hot here, I don't feel super motivated to be outside in the afternoons. And my favorite way to beat the heat is to lie in front of my fan like a corpse and read a book set in a scorching hot climate. Because misery loves company, I guess. You'd think I'd want to escape into a book set in an Arctic climate. But nope, hot day. I want to read something where the characters are getting sunburnt and sweaty. The book I chose for this heat wave came out in 2017 and was apparently made into a movie, but for whatever reason, it only came across my radar in the last couple of months. It's called The Dry by Jane Harper, and it's the first book in a mystery series that follows Australian federal agent Aaron Falk. Falk is a financial crimes investigator. He returns to the small town in rural Australia where he grew up for the first time in 20 years when he finds out that his childhood best friend Luke took the lives of his wife, his daughter, and himself. The region has been hit extremely hard by a persistent drought, and all of the local farmers are on edge. Most of the townspeople are unhappy that Falk has returned because they've long suspected that either he or his father was involved in the unsolved death of a teenage girl before they left town. But despite the hostility and the fact that Luke's murder-suicide case looks pretty cut and dry, Falk stays in town to investigate when Luke's grieving father asks for his help. The book follows his efforts to untangle what happened 20 years ago and determine if it's connected to the recent tragedy too. The Dry is a solid mystery. The setting and atmosphere of the book are impeccable. That stress caused by the drought and the fear and grief the townspeople had that one of their own was capable of extreme violence that they never saw the signs for, that fear is palpable. The different types of people living in the community and how they relate to each other seemed very real to me. Even though I've never been to Australia, this book took me into that world. I think it's well above average on setting. It also has a good plot. Wouldn't say I was really surprised by anything that happened, but the plot was believable and engrossing. And that is more than I can say for a lot of mysteries that I read where people don't behave as believable human beings in order to sell a crazy twist that the author came up with. I wouldn't call this book fast-paced. It's definitely not a popcorn thriller, but Harper does a really good job writing cliffhanger chapters that make it very hard to put down. And I finished the whole thing in one long, lazy Saturday afternoon. Remember, it was in the mid-90s, so it wasn't a lot else I felt up to doing. But I did have 2 problems with this book. My biggest problem was the characters. We only got the bare facts about each of the main characters. We knew where they grew up, who they were connected to and how, and we knew their professions. Sometimes we got minimal physical descriptions. That was about it. Really can't tell you much else about the main characters. I didn't feel like I got to know them at all. The book is plot-driven, and it's a good plot, but I personally tend to prefer character-driven books that have a stronger balance between character development and plot. I cared what happened because it's a mystery and I wanted to see how the puzzle came together, but I didn't get to know the characters well enough to care what happened to them specifically, and I didn't feel any emotions when we finally find out what has been going on. My other problem with the book was the way flashback scenes were handled. For most of the book, we're following the misadventures of Agent Fogg. It's not first person, so we're not in his head, but we're along for the ride. But sometimes the book would zoom out to this omniscient view of the past and fill in all the details that Fogg was unaware of. Something about this didn't quite work for me. It just seemed too easy to fill in the missing pieces with information Fogg couldn't possibly know. I just wish the flashbacks were handled differently somehow. I liked The Dry. I had a good time reading it, but it didn't have the kind of impact on me where I feel like I'll be thinking about it in the coming weeks. And right now, I don't plan on continuing with the series because I personally need more character development in order for these types of stories to have an emotional impact on me. If I'm being unfair and you think later books in the series do a better job of fleshing out Agent Fogg as a person, please let me know. I'd be really interested. If you haven't read this one and you are a reader who's more invested in plot than characters, I think this could be a great mystery for you. I gave The Dry 3 stars. Next, I read Aries Witch by Ivo Dominguez and Diotima Mantineia. Aries Witch is part of a 12-part series exploring each of the sun signs through the magic they may feel called to work with. The books are collaborations between Ivo and other witches and magical practitioners who have the sun sign being featured in that book. I'm not an Aries sun, but if you didn't know, we all have all 12 zodiac signs in our birth chart, and these energies get activated for us during significant transits. I'm trying to read each of these books during their seasons this year. In 2026, Aries season goes from March 20th to April 19th. I'm not going to say a ton about this book because I'm actually thinking about incorporating it into a video series about astrology and magic. But it's a really great reference series to spark inspiration for working with each sign in spells and rituals. And I highly recommend that you get a copy of whichever book features your sun sign and explore what resonates with you. This book gave me a lot to think about with fire, sunrises, and movement, and I'm glad that I read it. It's written at a beginner's level. I find it very accessible as an introduction to what it's like to be a magical Aries. Again, I highly recommend the series, but as a more intermediate to advanced practitioner, I always crave just a little more depth. So I gave this book 4 stars, and I suspect that's what I'll rate the series as a whole. It is fantastic for beginners, and it's a great reference material to have in your library, but it may leave advanced witches wanting more. I wish I could tell you that I ended my March 2026 reading adventures on another high, but alas, I cannot. For my last book of the month, I picked up a gothic fantasy called This Vicious Hunger by Francesca May. This Vicious Hunger tells the tale of Dora Grieve, a widow who jumps at the chance to leave everything she's ever known and study botany at a university with a renowned professor. Surrounded by male scholars who don't know quite what to make of her, Dora finds herself drawn to a mysterious woman named Olia, who spends her nights tending exotic plants in a locked garden. Olia's hold on Dora becomes stronger and stronger till it's all she can think about. But something is off, and Dora starts to question whether Olia is the key to unlocking her dreams or her nightmares. I don't have a lot of things to say about this book, unfortunately. It had a lot of elements I love, like a poison garden, a gothic setting, mysterious and dangerous characters, passion and obsession. But overall, it was very unsatisfying. The setting and the atmosphere were rich and lush. But I think it's another case of a book that's just trying to do too many things again, and the plot was very convoluted. Anytime it started to build towards something, we got lost in the weeds. And it has one of the most abrupt endings that I have ever read. Dora decides she's going to confront one of the other characters. Then you turn the page and the book is over. It doesn't feel ambiguous. It doesn't feel like a cliffhanger. It's more like the author got to the end of a chapter and then disappeared before she could finish the book. And I don't know, maybe that's actually what happened. Maybe she got abducted or something. I have no idea why this book ended so abruptly. Even just trying to tell you what the book I just read was about, this is the one I just finished. I'm coming up empty. Lesbians and poison, and they're really hungry because poison, and there's a locked garden, and they're fighting a lot. It's a little bit spicy. I don't know, whatever this book was trying to do, other books have done it in a way that worked better for me. And I do want to warn you, there is some animal suffering because there's this dubious scientific method with testing on animals. I don't really know what was going on there either. I'm pretty sensitive to that kind of thing, and it bothered me, but it didn't make me chuck the book across the room. It wasn't that graphic. But if you're like me and you can read about violence against people all day long, but really hate to read about violence against animals, could be another reason to give this book a pass. This Vicious Hunger, it didn't do anything for me, so unfortunately I gave it 2 stars. And that's really just because I liked the garden. And that's all the books I read in March. The fact that I found a 5-star read, She's a Doll by Barbara Truelove, and I got to watch a movie that I had so much fun with, Forbidden Fruits, makes March feel like a win. If you have read any of the books I talked about today, I would love to hear what you thought about them. And I'd also love to get your feedback on this new to me video format and my channel plans too. I'm a work in progress. This channel is definitely a work in progress. I'll never be a content machine as much as I'm trying, but if I kept you company today or helped you add something to your TBR list, then I'm thrilled. Thank you so much for watching. Be well and be witchcrafting.